What's up everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk about how to dissect a point. Points can be really good in the summertime because they offer a funnel area or ambush area for the fish to basically feed up on bait fish or crawfish or bluegill or anything that's out there. It allows them a funnel area coming out of these creeks. So a lot of the bait fish or whatever will be in the creeks and they'll make their migration out to the main lake, and those points are stopping points for the fish and for the bait fish, and those fish know that, and so the bass will actually set up on those points and be ready to feed. And also a lot of times, like today, we got a little bit of a chop, so a lot of times the wind, if you have a windy day, will push those will push the bait fish, or it'll stir up the mud or whatever. Not really sure if it actually pushes bait fish or not, but it'll stir up the mud, and those bait fish will kind of migrate to that point, and it allows those fish to be set up there and feed on those bait fish. So I was talking about wind, and the reason I was talking about wind is on this lake we don't necessarily have current, but on some lakes like the TVA lakes, current is a big deal. So a lot of times on like the TVA lakes and stuff, the current will really position those fish just the same way as the wind will position the fish on this given lake. Another important thing that makes points good is they usually have a harder bottom, and the reason for that is over the years the winds and waves and just anything, rain and stuff that we had, caused those areas to wash all the silt out, and it left it with the harder bottom that was left behind. So that harder bottom will typically, fish tend to like that a lot better than just like a silty, soft, muddy bottom. So that hard bottom will attract those fish, it'll attract the bait fish, and those fish will be there to eat up on those fish. When looking for a good point, it really depends on the time of year. So you have flatter points and then you have the steeper points, but a lot of times those flatter points are better in the fall whenever those fish are really ganging up on bait fish, really getting up and feeding up for the winter time. And also post-spawn, those fish really like to get on those longer points for some reason. They'll be closer to the deeper drops on those longer points, but those long, flat, shelfy points, what those fish do is the ones that are actually feeding will move up onto that point, and those are the fish that you want to target a lot of times. A lot of times the fish that are off the edge of the drop or suspended, those are the fish that are not really active and they're not really feeding. So those fish on those, it almost acts like a shelf or like a table. And so if you imagine it as a table, the bass are just kind of sitting up on top of that table, and whenever the bait fish swim over that or swim through that table, those bass are sitting there ready to eat them. So a lot of times those fish that are up on top of the shallowest part of that point are the ones that are the most active, and then the ones off the edge are a little bit less active or not feeding at all, and then they'll move up onto that point and get ready to feed. So the first thing that I do whenever I'm dissecting a new point is I look for any cover or rock piles, stumps, brush piles, anything that either someone put out there or something that was already there. And to do that, I use my side imaging. So I'll hop in the driver's seat, I'll idle around, and I'll mark any stumps or anything that looks good on my map. And then once I have 3 or 4, or maybe some points don't have anything, but once I have some of those stumps and stuff marked, I know that those are going to be the key areas on that point. Another thing that I look for is steeper contours. Typically, those steeper contours are where those fish will be. So if there's no cover on a point, but there's like one side of the point that has steeper contours than the other, then I know that small little area, whether it's a 20-yard stretch or a 100-yard stretch, is probably going to be the area that holds the most fish. So basically, when I'm dissecting a point, the first thing I'm looking for is I'll look at a map, and then I'll look at the side imaging, and I try to decide where the most high percentage area is on that point so that I spend less time on each point, because there may not be any fish on the point, but a lot of times there's fish on the point somewhere. So I like to try to find those high percentage areas, that way I can hit them real quick, move to the next point, and dissect that one as well. So let's get down and start graphing around and Then we'll get up on this point and see if we can't find any stumps or anything, and then after that we'll go fishing for them. So we're idling over this point right here, and what we found is we found a couple of stumps and rock piles right here, and there's actually some bait fish on here as well. So bait fish is always a good thing to look for as well. Obviously right now we're just looking for cover and trying to find different cover pieces on the point, but the bait fish is even better of a indication that there may be fish around. But right here we have a couple of little logs or whatnot, just random, as my buddy calls them, goodies along the bottom. They may be, to me it looks like little bitty pieces of sticks. There could be some rock and stuff mixed in, but those are goodies basically. And what that does is it allows those fish a place to hide, and that's kind of what we're looking for. It could be a big stump, it could be just little bitty rubble along the bottom, whether it's rock or whatever. So now we're coming up on this rock pile here, and as you can see, there's probably a few fish in there. You can kind of see a few bigger dots that are kind of hiding within those rocks, and shadows that to me look like some fish. So, and then now we're coming over here, and there's a big stump here, and you see that white dot behind the big stump? That's a fish sitting on that stump. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna turn around and we're gonna make a few casts on this, and hopefully we can find some fish. So basically we're gonna make some waypoints of what we just ran over, and then we're gonna go try and find some fish on that. So now that we're up on this point, the first thing that I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start on the deeper end of it, and I'm gonna cast shallow. And like I said earlier, a lot of the fish are on the shallowest part of the point, or up on top of the actual drop. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically stay out off the tip, and I'm going to toss this thing in as far as I can, and I'm going to kind of try and get some bites that way. One thing to note is it's really important to get the right casting angle when you're on these points. There'll be some times where just like a little bit of an adjustment, whether it's getting out above them or getting out in front of them and casting back, or things like that, will really make a big difference. But a lot of times when I pull up on a point for the first time, the first thing I'm going to throw is a big crankbait. And the reason for that is it gets a lot of big bites. Typically, if there's a school down there, or if there's a fish down there ready to eat, he's going to eat that first. After I make a few casts with my crankbait, I'll throw a jig, a Carolina rig, things like that, that will hopefully get me another bite that wouldn't bite this crankbait. But first thing I'll do is I'll throw this crankbait out there. I'll try to hit any stumps, rocks, anything like that. A lot of times I'll start out on the tip and fish around some of the deeper drops, and I'll fish from the deep side, holding my boat in. It depends on the lake, but in this case I'm going to hold my boat in like 20 foot, and I'll be casting to like 10 to 15 foot. But I'll do that, and then if by chance there's sometimes where a lot of times the fish will be pressured or something like that, where you have to do it the opposite way, where you'll go in on the bank, or basically on the bank, and fish from the shallow portion up. And that's easier to keep your bait on the bottom because you're pulling up a hill rather than pulling down the hill. But like I said, a lot of times I'll start on the deep end and cast shallow. But just something to keep in mind is sometimes those fish will like a different approach, a different casting angle, and it really could make a big difference in getting a few extra bites, or even triggering a school of fish out there. So I ended up getting my crankbait stuck in this rock pile that I marked on my graph. And that's one thing, is you can't be afraid to get your bait stuck. Obviously this one came out, but you can't be afraid to get your bait stuck, because you know you're fishing. If you're fishing in that rock pile, you know you're fishing a high percentage area where those fish are at. You got to be willing to throw your baits into areas that you may get stuck, and then get a lure retriever out if you have to, and get the bait out that way, but you really want to stay in the cover and stay in those goodies as much as you can. Another thing that's important on points is that timing is extremely critical. So if you don't get a bite on this point, maybe come back in an hour, 2 hours, a few hours later, and maybe those fish will pull up and they'll be eating at the time. So you can't never rule out a point. If you see fish around the area that may be suspended or something, then a couple hours later they may move up onto that point and start feeding, and you could really get a bunch of fish in the boat in a really short amount of time. So I hope you guys like this video. Be sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you guys next time.